So, let's now do the Eastern Conference of one thing that each Eastern Conference team need to do in order to make the playoffs. And for those of you that are looking for the Western Conference version, I did that yesterday, so make sure you guys check that out. And also, you can wait till the end of the video where when the end screen happens, that's when I'm basically going to be posting that video and the Western Conference version of one things each MLS team need to do in order to make the playoffs. So, yeah, without further ado, let's begin with Atlanta United. And just like what I said yesterday, we're going to go alphabetical order. And we start with Atlanta United, and there isn't really much to say about how they need to get to the playoffs and one thing they need to do because they're pretty stacked and they're probably the best team in the league. So all they need to do is do even half of what they did last season, which I'm pretty sure they're going to definitely do. I mean, with the talent they have, you could even maybe have a couple of players on their team injure and they'll probably still make the playoffs. That's how good Atlanta is and how they are not only the deepest team in the league, but they're the most talented team in the league. FC Cincinnati, the new boys. So, how can they make the playoffs? How can they be like LAFC and Atlanta United in their expansion year? Well, they need to be a low block team as one thing to make the playoffs. And when you look at FC Cincinnati right now, it looks like they are setting up to be a low block team. They have just bought so many defenders. They have a million central defensive midfielder. They have a million center backs and a million fullbacks in their team that it feels like this team is just going to pretty much be a kind of low block team. They're going to probably have like some of the formation that I think they'll probably use, maybe like a 4-5-1 or a 5-4-1, a very defensive kind of formation, and then they'll probably just counter attack, as that is pretty much their main tactics that they're going to use. And if they can do that well, then I think they can definitely make the playoffs, and that's the one key thing that they're going to hope that it will work for them in order for them to make the playoffs. For the Chicago Fire, well, they can do something that they did in 2017. So in 2017, Nikolic was absolutely on fire. He was the Golden Boot winner with 24 goals. They also had a couple of good supporting cast player, and that was also the year when they had Bastian Schweinsteiger that they just bought, and he immediately made an impact. They hope that he can do the same thing this year. And also they have David Accam doing that year, doing just amazing stuff, which I'm thinking maybe that's something that Alexander Katai need to kind of replicate. But the bottom line is they just need to do something that they did in 2017, which is a very entertaining team to watch. And I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see about this Fire team. I mean, this Fire team definitely have the attacking power, and in some way they definitely have a decent kind of midfield this year, although they don't really have a lot of depth in that department. But one thing I'm worried about this Fire team is that back line. I mean, there is just virtually nobody besides maybe Kappenhoff can be a MLS kind of starters in terms of that back line. And since they sold like so many players in that back line, it just makes it like before there wasn't a lot of depth in that back line. After this off season, when they sold off the remaining depth, it just makes it look very kind of empty and very thin. So yeah, but meanwhile, Columbus. So what they need to do in order to make the playoff, or what one thing they need to do in order to make the playoffs, is that they should just stick with the Berhalter system. Now, I know Caleb Porter has said that he wants to implement his system, and his system is definitely different than the Berhalter system. You know, the Berhalter system really kind of utilize on possession kind of plays, and I'm not quite sure Porter is kind of... He's not a big fan of that, but I think he should just stick with it as of now, because when you look at Columbus and the teams that they have, it's still kind of a Berhalter team. I mean, Columbus hasn't really done a lot this offseason. I mean, they've been rumored with a couple of big players. One of them, of course, is Darlington Nagbe coming to the Crew. But as of now, I just think that for Caleb Porter, one thing he needs to do, and just to be smart about it, is just go with the Berhalter system. I mean, there's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, right now, it seemed like Columbus are very committed to the Berhalter system, and even though Berhalter is no longer with that team, the the coach that is going to take over him needs to try to stick to that system until when the new coach decided to bring his own players, and that's what Porter is trying to do in the upcoming years. For DC United, well, they need to do the Lucho and Rootney connection again as one thing that they need to do. Or they can do exactly what they did in the second half of the season, which is just go on a crazy resurgence and be a team that is just going to be impossible to beat at Audi Field. I mean, Audi Field is an absolute fortress. It's one of, probably besides Providence Park and Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and even Red Bull Arena or Children's Mercy Park, it's probably the hardest place to get a win if you're an away team, or even get anything out of the game. So they need to try to do that again. For Montreal, well, Piatti, he can maybe give them one last hurrah for this team before potentially he is going to leave. You know, as you probably have heard from this offseason, he says that this could potentially be his last year with Montreal, and you know, Montreal has just depended on Piatti for so long now, and that, you know, he is pretty much Mr. Montreal. He is the guy that if he performs well with this team, then Montreal is going to do well. But if he does not perform, then Montreal is going to collapse. So he needs to have one last hurrah. He needs to give his best one last time for this team in order for Montreal to potentially make the playoffs. For New England, players committed to the Brad Friedel system. So there's been obviously a lot of talk about Brad Friedel, of how he really wants his player to commit to his system, and that if you don't commit to my system, then you're out of the door. And we have already seen a couple of players that don't want to commit to his system, and they are looking like they might be out of the door. So basically, he's kind of using the phrase, it's my way or the highway. And we'll see if the players will commit to his system. I mean, the first season he did pretty good, although the first season he didn't really had a lot of resources with him. And you know, New England this offseason, I think they did make a couple of signing. Obviously the biggest signing is getting Carlos Gale from Valencia, and we'll see if he of course will fit in the Brad Friedel system. But players need to commit to his system, because if you don't, then he's not going to pick you in the team. So next up, NYCFC, and I would say the same thing with NYCFC that I said with New England, is that the players need to kind of commit to the Dome Turin system. Although I will say this, for Dome Turin, he needs to kind of find a way to utilize his team. And I put his all caps because it is really his team. I mean, last year, I think maybe the only excuse you could say why Dome Turin did a terrible job, besides probably suffering back-breaking injuries like Young Herrera and David Villa spending time on the IR, is that it's still kind of a Patrick Vieira team. Well, now this offseason, you know, NYCFC had definitely spent the big bucks getting Alexandro Matrida as the replacement for David Villa. You know, we'll see if that will, of course, work out. And this is also why I think Dome Turin could be the first one to go in terms of coaches that I think could get fired heading into next season, is because what I saw last season from Dome Turin, it just doesn't feel like he is ready to... Well, I wouldn't say he's ready to be a coach, but he's not really kind of like an MLS type of coach. And for this season, if he does something similar to what he did in the second half of the season, heading into this upcoming season, NYCFC is not going to make the playoffs. Like, they did terribly when he took over in the second half of the season. They went from one of the best team in the league and looked like they were going to really challenge Atlanta for that MLS Cup, to a team that just completely fell off the cliff once Patrick Vieira left this team. So for Dome Turin, the pressure is going to be really on him, and if he does not perform and if he does not get this team to the playoffs, because I think despite the fact that NYCFC did lose Yangel Herrera and David Villa, two of the most important players on this team, there's still a lot of talent on this team. And when you see that much talent on NYCFC, and also they spend the big bucks in terms of finding a replacement for David Villa, you better hope that you make the playoffs, because if you don't, then you're probably going to get fired from your coaching position. For the Red Bulls, see Atlanta United, and this doesn't mean that they need to just play Atlanta United and win them, even though technically the Red Bulls have a very good record against Atlanta United, although the one time they did not beat Atlanta United is the most costly one, because that was the first leg in the Eastern Conference Final where they lost 3-0 and ultimately just lost the Eastern Conference Final and got eliminated from the playoffs. But the reason why I say see Atlanta United is that they just need to do something similar to Atlanta United, which is do even half of what they did last year. This is a really talented team, and also, I said about Atlanta United as probably the deepest team in the league. Well, Red Bulls fan might argue with me about that, because they also have a very deep team, and that is even after they lost Tyler Adams to this off season. So yeah, the Red Bulls, all they need is to do even half of what they did last year, and they're in the playoffs heading into this season. For Orlando City, they need a culture change. I mean, right now, Orlando City, there is so much problems with this team. And it's not just the players that is not performing, but it's also the front office making really bad move. The fans obviously feel like there's a disconnection between the front office and themselves, and also the coaching too. I mean, James O'Connor, he hasn't really done very well ever since he took over this team. I mean, he only had 2 or 3 wins ever since he took over his team. And I get that James O'Connor was kind of he was stepping into basically a situation where any coach stepping into that situation will always find themselves in the fire. But, it doesn't seem like he's anything better than what Jason Kreis is when he took over Orlando City. And right now, Orlando City just need a culture change. They need to think about trying to get back to the winning identity. And I'm pretty sure the fans are being very restless and started to kind of not really want to support this team anymore, because it's now almost 5 years, and I think this is the 5th season that Orlando City is going to be in MLS, and they still have not made the playoffs. And I think for the last 5 years, if you look at the last couple of expansion team in the last 5 years, they're the only team that hasn't made the playoffs in terms of the teams that were expansion team and comes into MLS. So yeah, for Orlando City, they need something. They need to start winning. I think winning is something that could provides that culture change. And when I say winning, I meant throughout the season, not the first couple of weeks. And that is one thing that's been just so frustrated as if you're an Orlando City fan, is that you see this team do very well for the first couple of seasons. It's yeah, it looks like we're going to make the playoffs. Oh, wait, that's false hope. We lose 19 out of 21 after that. So, yeah, they need to fix that kind of thing, and maybe that's one of the things that they need to change. For Philly, they need to hope that their new press system would work very well. So, Philly is kind of they're heading into this new season with a different identity. And, this team is now trying to use this press system. This is kind of a system that Ernest Tanner wants his team to play. And I don't know exactly if Jim Curtin can really deliver that. And if he doesn't, then Philly fan is going to get into his back, because apparently Union fans do not like Jim Curtin and want him to get fired so bad. Even last year, I was really one of the only one that kind of feel like Jim Curtin should deserve some credit, and then everybody else just saying, nah, he doesn't deserve any credit. He is an awful coach. This is just he got lucky, the fact that he has all these players that he picked up, and they they shine through, which in some sense, yeah, I mean, he kind of, these guys that were just kind of unproven players heading into the last season, and we don't know if they're gonna shine or not, and if he doesn't shine, then he's gonna definitely lose his job. But I think Jim Curtin, this season definitely he's back on the hot seat, and if he can work this press system that the GM wants him to play, then I think the Union is definitely going to make the playoffs. And it will also be interesting of how Marco Fabian is going to be utilized in this press system, because he's going to be pretty much the superstar for this team since they pay so much money to get him in the offseason. And finally, for Toronto, one last hurrah for this current core. So this core that they have is pretty much about to be gone. Like, the core is just aging really badly, and that the championship window for Toronto is really coming to a close, and this might be the last year that they can compete until they have to start rebuild and trying to get guys from their academy to basically rebuild this team. So for this year, maybe one last hurrah. Maybe Josie Altidore will just break out and have Javinko type of number. Maybe Michael Bradley can turn back the clock and be like what he was a couple of years ago with this team, and just do one last hurrah before they of course have to start thinking about rebuild, and the fact that they're going to start getting rid of the remaining players that was with this core that won the championship back in 2017. So yeah, there you go, or 2018 actually, but there you go. That is pretty much it. Or oh god, it's not 2018, it is actually 2017. I forgot 2018 was when Atlanta won the MLS Cup, so just ignore that. But yeah, there you go. That is pretty much it for all the things that or all the Eastern Conference team, and one thing that they need to do in order to make the playoffs. I will say about the East this year, it's definitely got much weaker than it was. I mean, so far, I know for a fact that teams that are definitely going to make the playoffs is probably going to be Atlanta and the Red Bulls, but then the rest of the teams in the Eastern Conference, you can definitely make a case that they could make the playoff heading into this upcoming season. But again, there's only 7 teams that can make the playoffs, and in this case, besides Atlanta and the Red Bulls, with these 10 remaining teams, only half of them would eventually fulfill what they really hope, which is make the playoffs heading into this upcoming season. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.